We're going to focus a lot today on work, happiness at work, fulfillment, how to advance in your career, and what the keys are to having a successful career, right? So I think that's a very relevant topic now. A lot of people in the workforce have been impacted by layoffs. They're finding themselves looking for a new opportunity. Some people just aren't happy where they are. And so they're feeling stuck. They don't know how to make a change, or maybe they want to make the most of their current employer or their current opportunity, but they don't know how to do that, right? So whether you wanting to do something different, climb where you are, find another company, another role, change careers altogether, whatever that is, you have to have a plan and there's an approach to doing that, right? So we
Yep.
want to talk about some of those things today. But first, I want to talk about just general happiness and fulfillment at work. All
Okay.
right. Uh, the average employee, this is a statistic that I found, right? Research shows that the average employee spends 90,000 hours at work in their lifetime, which
That's
is
a
a
lot.
which is the a third of the average lifespan, right? So that said, if you're miserable at your job, the odds of you being happy in general
Yes.
go down significantly, right?
Right.
So that's why it's so important to have work you enjoy and to have a positive work life because it has so much impact on your overall well-being and happiness in life. And we haven't even gotten into being able to provide for your family. What are
Right.
you earning? And the survival aspect and the livelihood aspect and your lifestyle and those kind of things, right?
Yep.
So that being said, let's talk a little bit about happiness, right? So, according to this same study, 49% of employees say they're happy in their current job, which is less than half.
Right.
Why are so many people unhappy in their jobs, Alicia?
Everybody says don't blame it on the pandemic, but I think the pandemic plays a role in this, right? Because I think that during the pandemic, it threw everybody's world into chaos and people had a shift in their mindset and they started to question what's most important in my world. Is
Okay.
it family? Is it work? Is it purpose? Whatever it is. But people started to question their reality
Hmm.
coming out of the pandemic.
Okay.
And in doing so, many of them realized that they didn't have a purpose in
Hmm.
work. And when you were talking earlier about, happiness, I often ask my clients, what is happiness? Define happiness for me, for you. What does happiness look like for you? Because I think in the workspace, I'm a true believer that you have to have a purpose. You have to go to work to do something beyond just collecting a paycheck, or it gets really old, really stale, really boring, really negative very quickly. And
Yeah.
so I think you need a reason to get up and then you need to do everything that you do every morning. And I think people are unhappy because they don't have a purpose.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. So, very important to have clarity about why you're doing what you're doing,
Yeah,
is what you're saying.
absolutely. If you don't, then you're just a hamster on a wheel. You're just
Yeah.
going to work every day. You're doing the exact same thing, the exact same practices, the exact same things that your boss is asking you. And then you come home at the end of the day and you say, what did I do today? What
Yeah.
did I accomplish?
Yeah.
You
Very true.
check the boxes, but that is that all life is? Checking boxes? I don't think so. That's not the kind of life I want to lead.
Yeah, when you say it like that, it does feel it doesn't feel very exciting to talk
No.
about checking boxes. I know that's part of what we do, right? But
Yeah.
it can't be the heart of what we do.
It's balance. Life is about balance, right? There'll be ebbs and flows. There'll be positive, there'll be highlights, there'll be low lights, but you want to balance it out so it kind of just middle of the road.
Okay, okay. And we're going to get into a couple of generational questions in just a second, but the concept of purpose, it's a relatively modern concept though, right? In terms of purpose at work, because our parents and grandparents really didn't talk about it
No.
much. And not that it wasn't important, maybe they just didn't realize and things evolve over time, right?
Yeah.
So we look for more and we expect more out of our careers now than in the past, which is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who is struggling with that concept of purpose and doesn't really understand what that means or how to find it?
You know, I I think it's important that you start with what are your core values? What are the things that in your life keep you grounded and keep you focused on the outcomes that you want to have in life? And then you have to figure out what excites me? What am I passionate about? Because
Hmm.
I think, somebody will say, "Oh, I'm passionate about art," but I'm a technologist. Like I don't understand how those two fit together. There are ways to connect the dots
Yeah.
so that your passion comes through in your day-to-day activity. But
Yeah.
I think it's really about figuring out what keeps you grounded and what gets you excited, where your passions lie, and finding the blend between those two. And purpose, look, I didn't figure out my purpose till I was probably 20 years or so into my career
Oh,
because
wow.
it wasn't a focus. Wasn't a focus. Purpose wasn't anything I was thinking about early on.
Yeah.
But as I started to do my job, and what triggered it for me was managing people.
Yeah.
When I started managing people, I realized I want these people to be their absolute best.
Hmm.
My purpose is to nurture and grow them and coach them and mentor them, which is how I ended up where I am today in coaching.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Got it. Yeah. And you know what? I think a little bit to your point, when I think about purpose from, from my perspective, or when I'm coaching with someone, we talk about what is it that, well, first of all, what are your gifts? What are you good
Mhm.
at? What are the things you do well with relative ease? Not that you don't have to maximize those skills and get training,
Yep.
but the things that come easier to you, even thinking back to school, what subjects were you good in
Yeah.
versus others, and that kind of thing, right? So, what are you good at? What professions will allow you to spend more time in your sweet spot
Yes.
and maximize your skills? And then, from a personal perspective, what do you care about? Like, what are you passionate about?
Yes.
Uh, and is there a way you can leverage your skills to help others? For me, like, I like to help people avoid hurdles and pitfalls that I've had. And so that's where the coaching thing comes in, is helping
Yeah.
teach people how they can have a better outcome than I had faster, and learn from experience and things I've been through and things that I've learned, and just pass it down. And I think that's why some people mentor, right?
Yeah.
So
One,
that,
two, one of the things I say all the time to people is let my hindsight be your force for your sight.
oh, I
Don't
love
make the
that.
same mistakes I made. So I'm going to teach you about the mistakes I made so that you don't make them, and it advances your path and your journey that much faster.
That's a good one. Let my hindsight be your foresight. Okay. You said it much simpler than how I said it. I like that. I like that. So back to we talked about purpose being a modern concept, right? So that kind
Yep.
of leads me to another question. Is it harder or easier to be happy at work now than when our parents and grandparents were in the workforce?
That's a complex question. My mom spent 30 years in corporate America, so I would love to have asked her this question looking at my brother and I versus her career. I think it comes down to perceptions. And what are your perceptions of happiness? Since what our parents and grandparents may have defined as happiness likely looks very different than what we aspire to be or happiness for us today. Um, First of all, they didn't have the salaries we have in most cases. So that looked different from them, the financial implications of it. We have things like flexibility that they didn't have. My mom and I
Okay.
were joking that for years, people at UPS had to wear pantyhose. All the women had to wear pantyhose. Like, what? That's crazy. That's crazy. People would quit their jobs if you made them wear pantyhose now. And that is a very recent change. I think only in the last decade have they gotten rid of the pantyhose thing. Anyway, I
Okay.
digress.
Okay.
But flexibility. They also don't have the different levels of competition, right? The competitive nature of the workforce today is much higher. They also don't have the connectivity that we have. We all have a phone, we have our email on our phone and our laptop.
Yes.
People can get us at any moment.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't know that I can actually answer that question because I think the worlds are so different
So different.
that again, but I think it goes down to how did they define happiness versus how we define happiness. I would think that
Yeah.
maybe our definition of happiness is a little bit more materialistic
Oh,
because I think our definition of success is very different than our parents and definitely our grandparents' definition of success. So I think it's all kind of a continuum
mm,
that has just evolved.
okay. I think our parents and grandparents' idea of success was more stability oriented.
Yes.
Ours is probably more status oriented.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that. I mean, my great great grandfather was a farmer. You know, my grandfather was, he laid tile. He laid tile. That's what he did in company. And he'd say, you know, if you ever go to the Bank of America building in Charlotte, I laid the tile in the executive bathroom. And I was like, but he bragged about that because that was huge for
That was
him,
awesome.
you know, and I'm just like, that's just crazy. So when I think
Yeah.
about it, I think it's, yeah, I think it's definitely they were stability. Parents stayed at careers for 30 years.
Yes.
We don't, or very few of us do. It's
Yeah.
it's just all
It's
relative.
much different. But you
Yeah,
know what? They did those things to pave the way so that we would have more choices.
they did.
Yeah. So that
They
we would
did.
have education and be more empowered in our careers. And we're going to talk about career empowerment a little bit later.
Yeah,
But we owe a lot of gratitude and thank you to those who came before
absolutely.
us. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Outstanding. Great conversation. So let's go back to a few of these statistics, right?
Okay.
Because I think they're interesting. So, uh, also citing some more workplace statistics, 55% of Americans claim work exhaustion. 45% of workers relate their weight gain to their current job.
We
And then
sit all the time.
we do sit, we sit a lot. Well, not everybody, but a lot of us do.
A lot of people.
And then 44% of US women would leave their job for the sake of having more flexibility,
Mm,
right? So when
yeah,
we look at all those exhaustion, fatigue, wanting more flexibility, health implications that people attribute to work. Given these stats, do you think there's a climate of overwork and stress in today's workforce?
absolutely. I felt it. I know some of my peers and former colleagues have felt it. Look, I think the current environment of doing more with less. So you have smaller teams, but the workload doesn't change.
Yeah,
You've got the competition that I talked about earlier, the technology and the constant connectivity of just being on all the time,
always on. Yeah,
always on, never turning off. And, you know, I said, I have rules. If you go to dinner with me, you got to put your cell phone up because we're not going to sit it on the table. We're not going to sit it on the dinner table. I'm
yeah.
not doing that.
That's a great rule. That's a great rule. Now you get a little rebellion when you try to institute that rule. People
Yeah.
aren't happy about it.
Exactly. But all of these things and a lot more have created a really stressful environment where, to my point, we're always on. We feel a need to to respond in the moment, not let things, you know, you can't take an hour and a half break, really? That's crazy.
Yeah,
Um, and so I think it's given workers a greater flexibility in the ability to better integrate their work with their home life by working from home.
hmm,
And it's created it's cultivated a culture where, you know, seeing each other and building relationships doesn't happen anymore. So that takes away the personal element of the work world, which you used to get, hey, how was your weekend? You know, you do the 15 minutes at the coffee machine. Now
yeah,
that doesn't happen because your coffee machine's in your kitchen. You come upstairs and you jump right in. And so I
yeah,
think all of these things have created an environment that I don't like to call it toxic, but it has become very untenable and challenging to be in. And that
yeah.
creates even greater stress for all of
Okay.
us.